Once upon a time, a beginner's amp or an entry-level amp is probably not something you would have wanted to have found yourself having to play on a gig. You may have sort of suffered through your early years of guitar playing with an amp that didn't sound too good, or may have suffered playing at home through an amp that was quiet but didn't really have a lot of features or didn't sound that great. But the modern player has so many options and amazingly good options for entry-level, and I use that in inverted commas, entry-level amps that just have a feature set that completely belies their market or their kind of tag. And the Blackstar IDX100 and the IDX50 are two new entries into that market that absolutely take this and I think raise the bar again in terms of what is available on these amps. Blackstar have been producing great beginner and entry-level sort of amps for quite a long time. And this really just builds on a bunch of things that they have released in recent years, I think, and kind of piles them all into one really great unit. So what we have here is basically a 100 watt 1x12 and a 50 watt 1x12 amp that has 6 different amp sounds in it, a whole lot of pre and post effects, as well as a few little extra features which we'll talk about, including power scaling and tube-like response. So one of the really cool things that a modern guitar player has is access to things like effects. And when I was growing up playing guitar, I maybe had a Boss DS1 distortion pedal or something like that, and that was about it to start my journey into effects pedals. But I sort of loved the sounds that I could hear on records, phases and flanges and delays and reverbs and all of these things, but I didn't really have the money to go and buy them as a young player. Or if I was new to playing the guitar, maybe I wouldn't want to spend that much on a new hobby. But something like this includes all of those sounds, which I think is just such a great way to get into playing the guitar, and especially if you're new to playing the guitar, making it sound fun and enjoyable is going to make you practice more, and if you practice more you get better, and it just feeds itself. But Blackstar here have put a whole lot of really great features into this amp, and the only way for me to talk about them is to sort of go through it one by one across the top here. So we have got, like I said, 6 different amp sounds, and it starts from a clean warm sound, they call it, clean and bright, a crunch, super crunch, OD1 and OD2. So basically going through cleanest through to dirtiest. So I am going to set all of my controls here at 12 o'clock, and we're just going to hear what some of these sound like to begin with. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to turn some of my effects off here and leave my reverb on. For the record too, we have a dynamic microphone here on the speaker, and I'm also using another great feature of this amp. It's direct XLR out using the cab rig technology to go directly in, and we'll blend those two sounds. But let's start with the clean, warm sound. I'm playing a telly here. So again, a nice amount of bright spank if you like it, and not too brittle, not too kind of harsh sounding. And again, like, I'm not going to change any of the controls of the EQ at the moment. Everything is sitting at 12 o'clock there. Let's go to clean bright. I understand, by the way, that clean warm is vaguely based on the Blackstar St. James, the EL34 version. The clean bright, I think, is based loosely on the Blackstar Artisan 30. And it is a little bit more in the Vox sort of territory, and just a little bit more crunch on it, a little bit more kind of, I don't know, modern push, I guess. Which I really like, to be honest. We then get to the crunch setting, which I think is again based on another Blackstar, the St. James, the 6L6 version. Actually, maybe that's the EL34, but it's a St. James, I'm sure. Which is square in, like, you know, Marshall early rock and roll and kind of mid-gain rock territory. We then go to the Super Crunch, which is a little bit heavier again. which I think sounds awesome. The great thing about this is that I am not, like I say, not changing any of the EQ settings, and each one of these is sounding good as it is. So that's a great start. OD1, again, slightly heavier. And then finally, we've got OD2, which is our most modern, most kind of chuggy, if you like. Let's hear that. And again, like I have got a simple reverb on here and I haven't touched the EQ, and all of these sound great straight out of the gate, which is another great thing. If you're new to an amp like this, you want to be able to plug it in and, you know, make it sound good straight away. So of course I can then go through and I can change a few things. So let's go back to the Super Crunch. I'm going to increase the gain. I'm going to maybe add some mids, take away a bit of lows. Sounds great. Next thing that I've got on here is the Blackstar ISF or infinite shape feature that features in a lot of their amps, and it sort of gets us, it's like a broader tone shift, and they loosely say it goes from American through to British. It's in the middle at the moment. I'm going to go all the way to one side just so we hear an extreme of it. And to the other side. So there's a little bit on the left-hand side, I think is the more British one, and there's a little bit more mid-range in it. And on the right-hand side, I think is the more American one, and it's a little bit more scooped, a little bit less mid-range in there. And you can blend this to taste. So I would probably like a little bit more mids, but maybe not full. So I'm going to go about 9 o'clock on my ISF there. Yeah, I really like that. Let's go back to the clean, bright. Let's dial the treble down and the bass down. Let's put the gain up a bit on this one. Cool. Each one of those amps is great sounding and is fun to play. And again, if you have fun playing the guitar, you are going to play more. And if you play more, you get better. And if you get better, you take over the world, right? Something like that. We include in this some effects as well, which is not new for an amp in this kind of category, shall we say. But what this does have is a lot of control over those effects. So some of the competitors to this amp in other brands may have included some drives and some reverbs and some modulations, but they're relatively either stuck in one sound and you just choose whether you want that sound or not, or you've got to get an app and you've got to be able to control it with an app, and it's a bit of faffing about. And a lot of guitarists are technophobes and a lot of technophobes are guitarists. So this is all accessible on the top panel of the amp, which I think is really, really important, because if you want to be able to dial up tones quickly, you don't want to be looking for your phone to find the app. So on here we have our pre-effects. Now that gives us things like drives and compression. And so if I push that pre-effects there, I can then push this little type and I can choose TS drive, so Tube Screamer, or there's a blue drive, K drive, yellow drive. Now, these are all, I enjoy figuring out what they're kind of imitating here. But, you know, OG distortion is probably a DS1. Rodent is probably a rat. Pi fuzz is definitely a fuzz, a big muff. Smile fuzz is definitely a fuzz face. You know, so a whole lot of fuzzes and drives in there. You've got a boost, sort of based on the Blackstar valve boost. clon style drives, you know, all of the drive types that you would want in there, and fuzzers and compressors as well as envelope filters. So let's just put on this envelope filter for fun. Cool, great sound. But the other thing that's awesome about this is that I have the controls for that effect on the unit here as well. So how sensitive it is, what the peak is. So I can make changes to this, high pass, band pass, low pass. I can make changes to this effect on the face of the amp. Now that I think is a really important feature, because most amps that do this sort of thing with lots of effects in them don't have that sort of control on the top panel. That sounds great. Let's try one of the fuzzers out, shall we? Just for fun. I'm going to go to the, let's go, I'll try this octave fuzz out. So. Live out all your Hendrix dreams. Let's try the, I'm going to go with the smile fuzz. And just like a good fuzz should, when I roll my guitar volume down, it becomes quite a nice, clean sound. Again, to lean on the Hendrix theme. A lot of Hendrix's clean tones were a fuzz rolled down, and so it cleaned up really nicely. Oftentimes digital fuzzes or digital emulations of fuzz pedals don't do that. This seems to do it very nicely. Which is awesome. All right, I'm going to turn that off. We're going to go to modulation here. I've got a vibrato here, but again, I can choose from vibe, tremor, phases, flanges, chorus, basically all of the modulation effects that you could want. And again, I can control the speed and the depth and other important parts of that effect on the unit itself. So here, there's my vibe. I might turn this up as speed a little bit, so it's a bit. Great, great sound. All right, let's go one more here. I'm going to go with the, let's go with the chorus. Really nice. Turn the mod off there. Of course, you can keep all of these on together too. I'm going to add in some delay. So here we've got a multi-tap delay. So in that kind of quarter and dotted eighth thing there, I have a tap tempo as well. So let's just tap that in time. Let's change some of the, I can change the time of this. I can also change on this the feedback and the mix level. I know with some other competitors of this amp, you've kind of got a set amount of feedback and it's just a level of your delay, and sometimes there's a bit too many repeats of your delay, and it's, you want to have a bit more control of this. You've got in here a tape echo, a digital delay, an analog delay, and a shimmer delay. Let's hear the shimmer delay just for fun. Lovely. Now that's a fun sound to have. So let's put some ridiculous fun sounds on here. I'm going to put the envelope and that chorus and the delay, and I'm going to make my reverb a different. I'm going to go to a hall reverb here. Let's see what we end up with. Fun. Again, I cannot stress this enough. If you have fun playing, you will play more. If you play more, you get better. But what if you're already a gigging musician? Is this the sort of amp that you could take on a gig? Absolutely. And let's have a look at another few really great features that they include in here. So we have got a master, so a power scaling here. So at the moment, I am on the 10 watt mode, and that 10 watt mode is giving me a good amount of sound in the room, but it's definitely not too loud. It means that I can crank it up a bit. Let's just gonna change my reverb here. Let's go reduce that, reduce the mix. Great. So we have got here a 10 watt mode, a 1 watt mode, and a 100 watt mode. So if I just go to the 1 watt mode to start with. Now, why would you want a 1 watt mode? Well, when you crank the amp, it responds differently. And so by having it at only 1 watt, you can crank the master and change the response of the tubes, which we'll come to in a sec. And it will feel different. But it means you can get that pushed power amp section sound, but at a low, maybe home level or recording level. If I then go, so here's my level at, and we'll hear this more through the microphone, but that's at 1 watt. If I then go to 10 watt, which is considerably louder, and let's go to 100 watt. And I'm not even halfway up on the master, and that's easily giggable levels there. Let's go back to the 10 watt here. So you've got that ability to just, for the room that you're in, whether it's home, whether it's a small recording studio or a small stage, you're playing at a small gig, or you're at a bigger gig, you've got the ability to choose the power that you have of coming from the amp. Finally, and this is, I think, the most interesting feature of an amp like this, is the response. So I am going to go onto this crunch setting, and we're going to just straighten up our EQ a little bit there. What the response does is it changes the effect of what a power amp tube would do. So if we're talking about 3 sort of main food groups, if you like, of tubes, you've got 6L6 or kind of Fender world, you've got EL34 or kind of Marshall world, and you've got EL84 or kind of Vox world. So the response of those tubes in the way that the preamp interacts with the power amp is quite different and gives those amps a slightly different feeling. But it feels like it's a little bit more immediate or a little bit sort of more blocked. I don't know if that's the right word. Compared to, say, a Vox, which is much softer and much more compression in the way that those tubes react. Probably the best way for me to really describe it to you would be to just play it. And let's see if we can hear a difference. But there's certainly a feel difference. At the moment, I'm on 6L6. So I've got this crunch setting and I am on 6L6 mode. Let's go to EL84. So immediately a little bit less high end in there, a little bit more mid-range, and it feels a little bit more compressed. And then the EL34. A little bit more bark to that, a little bit less hardness to this, to the feel of the amp there. But I'm just going to play this here and I'm going to cycle through them quickly. Let's have a listen. So EL34, 6L6, EL84, I am someone who likes EL84 amps, so I'm going to stick to the EL84 sound, I think, because the feeling and the kind of way that amp that reacts, it feels like home to me. But you can set that to taste. The other thing that's awesome about this is that this is MIDI capable, and you can control pretty much all of the features of this by MIDI, including being able to change presets and change different sounds. There is also the ability to save up to 3 different sounds on the unit here per bank, and there are multiple banks, and you can then get an external foot switch to control things like channel switching, banks up and down, presets up and down. It's really, really well thought out and well laid out. So it's I think it's very dense in terms of what's in it, but there is a certain ease of use that makes this a great unit. The difference between the 100 and the 50 is pretty negligible. The main difference is that this 100 watt is obviously 100 watts, so slightly louder. It has an XLR out the back for the cab rig software, and it also has MIDI control. The 50 watt, on the other hand, does not have a XLR, but it does have a TRS output. So it still has the cab rig software, it just doesn't have an XLR output for it. And it also doesn't have MIDI. And it being 50 watts, it's slightly quieter, I guess, although that will be negligible at kind of home or gig levels. It's a very good size. You can see it's a great, very portable amp, and it sounds just as good as this one, has all of the same features other than the MIDI and the XLR. So both amps, I think, punching way above their weight and their price point, and just sound great. Again, I was able to get super quickly able to get sounds that I would use on a gig and be happy to play, and to be able to then have all of that control over both pre and post effects, different delays, different reverbs, different responses via tubes. And then I can use the Architect software that Blackstar include, and we've done some videos about that before, to be able to control the amp sim, the direct recording. You can't really go wrong with an amp like this. And like I say, the access that players have to great value, incredible sounding amps these days is second to none. So I don't think we should let anyone tell us about the glory days of guitar back in the day. I don't think there's another time in history where you would want to have been a home or a hobbyist guitar player, because your access to great sounding gear is better than ever. I'd love to know what you think about something like this. Do you use an amp like this in a gig, or would you use it in a gig? Do you use it in home? Would you use it at home? Let us know in the comments. Fight it out, but go and check one out if you're in the market for something like this. As always, thanks for watching Noisegate. See you next time.